Hi, everybody. So Anya and I are here today. We're going to try and stay on YouTube. So we're going to try and mind our words. I'm just saying this now. And we're going to talk about unity and how we're now starting to be able to have conversations that will bring us into unity because we have been taught to be divided. So Anya had a great conversation about that. And I'd love for her to tell us the story.
Yeah. Okay. So that's so cool. I love story time. I get very excited. Yeah. So I know we've not got too long, so I will limit my story times because they can go on for sure. But in short, I had a really fantastic debate with someone the other day, family friend, someone close. And if I'm being honest, it is a subject that I have avoided, and it is something I do kind of skirt round a little bit. I mentioned that in his last video because I don't want to be disrespectful and I don't like to offend people because of my own opinions and my own views. And because of who I am, I find it hard to lie or filter or just go along with something because it pleases the conversation. So I just don't get into these conversations to avoid that being the thing.
Mhm.
And the other day it just happened, it just happened because I can't remember the specific catalyst for it, but I think it was the terminology in terms of like what's going on now. I was referring to it as the Great Awakening, and their opinion was that it was end times. And that's what started this debate, in terms of like, I was like, okay, so what makes you believe that? So then we got into this whole debate, and shall I just reference to the point? Obviously, the person I was having the debate with is a devout Catholic, practicing Catholic. And obviously, I'm coming from a more of spiritualist and awakening kind of perspective. And it went on for a good 3 hours. And the main reference that I got from it, the main reflection it did, it was great. I'm not joking, it was a long time. And it was just so calm too, because in my own reflections, I can admit when I've debated in the past, like I just got so over involved and too like emotionally attached to what I was bringing forward because I did care and because I am passionate. But it kind of created this aggression and almost like assertiveness with it, which now I don't have. So I was able to myself really have a conversation that was just really calm and really just chill and really go into the depth of what we both believe. And what I noticed and what I think he was shocked by as well is the similarities, and I don't think necessarily he'd had a conversation or a debate with someone himself that is saying, listen, I agree with what you're saying. I agree with the core principles of, your fundamental values and beliefs in what your religion is made out of. But my own perspective is that there's limitations to our abilities and to our connections and to our connections to source and what we're capable of and our ascension process that's going on now. Because in my opinion, it can't just be that we're here to acknowledge Jesus Christ as a savior, because then what else is there to then do? It has to be more so in terms of, okay, what's a soul here to do? What's the point in living multiple lifetimes if that's something you believe? What's the point in experiencing all these different soul lessons, as I call them? Like, why would that be relevant to our human existence? Why would we not just be here to then just live in accordance to them principles? That there has to be more expansion, in my opinion. So that kind of went on a lot, but the core principles was the unity, was the connection, and how we could conversate about these things and have such an agreement in a lot of things. But then when we did disagree, it was holding space for each other and giving room for each other to really expand on why that is, and there were a couple of things said that maybe could have been a little bit triggering to each person, but that was then expanded on and explained, and even some statements were retracted and slightly changed. And it was just, I've just never been able to have a conversation of that nature so deep and to express myself so openly and so comfortably and confidently. And then not only did that kind of share my own, but it expanded on my own beliefs. And that was something Brad said as well. It was something that we both felt like helped give more clarity and more depth and more things we've not thought about before, because we were asked questions that I'd not even thought about, allowed me to then expand on certain aspects to my own knowings and to my own kind of system of knowings. And that was really interesting too. But yeah, in terms, the next day I got a message saying thanks so much for a beautiful conversation, what a meaningful kind of powerful conversation that we had. And And I learned things there and certain terminology because, for example, like I use Jesus Christ or God sometimes in paraphrasing, and I didn't realize that that can be quite offensive and disrespectful. Obviously, it's common sense, but you don't think about them things till they're brought to your attention in terms of like in an aspect of that. So I've been more conscious of things like that and just trying to be more respectful in my own self. And it's just about like expanding our own knowledges and expanding our own perspectives to be able to live a life that is so much more aligned to heart frequency and so much more in connection with each other, regardless of the way we translate it, because that's what I found the biggest difference is the words, the terminology, and the translation is simply the biggest difference in my personal opinion. So yeah, it was a very, very, very interesting, kind of expansive, powerful debate, but also something that I found very almost comforting, to be able to have that conversation, because it's not something I have felt comfortable to do before, with certain people, and even with these people, because again, I don't want to offend. So it was really nice to feel like I wasn't doing that, and to also feel like I was learning and spreading knowledge too.
Yeah. And I think the way that you went into it with non-attachment, that's the most important thing. And then that person was able to do that too. Like you didn't have the emotional engagement. But the difference to me is that like religion was created to split apart. And a lot of things came out of that, a lot of conflicts, I'm going to say. So there were many, many conflicts over the years because of it. But it also told people that things were outside of you. The biggest power was outside of you. And it taught everybody that they were small and that they didn't have any power to basically take care of their own life. So follow the rules and then you'll get there.
Yeah.
So it like inverted everything. Because really it's within us, like the Christ consciousness is coming into us. It's in there. And as we realize it's there, then we start to act that way. So that's 100%. The unity part of it. So I feel like they just fractured it. They fractured the unity with the 100%. Decisions. And then they created conflict so that people never would say, oh, it's almost exactly the same. Like it doesn't matter what the words are. The feeling is the same. So that's how they got everybody to be split.
Yeah. And when you have like so many truths in so many different religions and so much overlapping, that's one thing that we have to also be aware of. There's so many concepts and things that overlap and prophecies and things like that. And like one question I was asked, or one question I asked them is why? Because in my opinion, as a spiritualist and someone that's doing consciousness work, I don't necessarily feel the need for. I think this is a big difference. That I believe what I know, and as long as you're living your truth and you're happy and you're living in heart alignment and you're contributing to the awakening, I really don't care what you call your beliefs. Like that does not bother me. That's your choice, your free will. And that's one thing I find that obviously in certain religions, you won't make it through ascension if you're not at this part of this religion. You won't make it through heaven, the golden gates, if you're not, a Catholic or you've not done these certain things. And that's what I don't resonate with, because I don't personally believe that's true. Like I don't believe we're not worthy until we've been baptized or until we've released the sins. That we are born worthy and we are born divine. And the question I asked was why is there a need to kind of convert other people? And their response was, it's what you do as a good Catholic. But my reiteration to that was, well, if I chose to follow what you're saying, just in case, if I don't do that, then I won't get through heaven, then I would be living a false life, a life of a lie, out of fear, to conform to that of a just in case that'll get into heaven. And how is that living a life that is centered to truth and heart and living, you know, living in kind of the God's image? That's almost the opposite of that, because I'd be living by something that I completely don't align with in terms of following rules and structures and kind of certain ways of behaving and acting that are not necessarily true to my soul. That's not necessarily how I want to live, you know, and that should be more so we choose to live in freedom and how our soul chooses to express itself without that limitation. And I think that we're created to stop us being so individual, unique, different, powerful, and that way to activate each other. You know, if we were, it's again, a lot of it's bound by fear, a lot of that I noticed. And that's one thing that I think keeps them small and keeps them feeling less than and not as powerful as, because it's almost like blasphemy to think you would be as powerful as God, even though we come from God. So why would we not have that same, maybe not magnitude of capacity of energy that source holds at one time, but we are a fractal of that. So we have access to that energy at all times. So there's no limitation to the energy that we can access from that. Whereas they are taught that it only comes down and through certain people like priests and popes and things like that. When why would it pick certain people and not all humans that are here born of that divine energy?
Yeah. It's a hierarchy. So they've created a hierarchy, which is the way that the whole world has been run. But hierarchy's going bye-bye, and it's going to be unity, and people are going to sit down, and if it takes all day to figure out like something together, then they will do it in the future, because we need to be unified, because that's who we like. It's like going back to God source. Like, we're going to be unified again, and we're going to live that way and have that beauty within us and that Christ consciousness within us. And that's what the Christ aligned body is, the crystalline body. So,
and that's the thing, not that we're saying that it's wrong. There is, you know, Christ came, in my opinion, to show us that reflection of his miracle. Divine miracle is a reflection of who we are and what we're capable of. That's why he came, and yet it was inverted to then be shown as only that person has that power. But that's not true. As we've seen, there's multiple healers that are able to connect with the elements, connect with water, connect with wind, connect with healing abilities. You know, they're possessing these divine miracles because they're not necessarily a miracle that one person possesses. There's something that we all, as different individuals, we all have different abilities that we have access to. And like you say, with the crystalline activation within our bodies, that's how we access that. And one thing I found really interesting is in religion and Catholicism, you've got the, I don't know the order, but it's the Holy Spirit, the Son of Christ, and God. I think it's God, the Holy Spirit, and Son of Christ. And in my personal reflection, and that's how you access God energy. Whereas in my personal opinion, it's your mind, body, and soul. And once you align them, then you're connected to the source and high frequencies. So it's almost like that trinity has been inverted and taken outside, so that if you look for the answers in books and in scriptures, and in, again, these are all human translations from other humans, so it's not necessarily an unbiased, unfiltered message. It's, again, a human translated reflection from someone else's opinion, so it's not direct from source. So when you're looking within, when you're meditating, when you're reflecting, when you are being able to really, like, you know, confirm it, because that was the question I was asked, like, well, how do you know these things? And I'd say, well, it's a case of, for example, I'll be thinking about Archangel Michael, or not even that, I'll go to a place for a wild swim, and then I'll end up driving past a place 2 hours away from my home, and where I've picked a spot to go for a swim, the church next door is St. Archangel Michael and All Angels Church, and that's where we need to do the clearing, and there's a big statue of angels and white others leading the way. And so it's the confirmation I get from the experience I live, and from the music that's come on, from the signpost that's there, from a call with someone across the world that tells me exactly what I've been dreaming of or thinking of, you know. And it's this synchronicity that, for me, that's where I get my evidence from, that's where I get my confirmation from, because it's downloaded in and then it gets confirmed by the external world around me. And that, to me, is more reliable than a book that may be, you know, regurgitated and rewritten and used for to suit other people's narratives.
Yeah, because there's a lot that's been pulled out of that book. And there's a lot, I don't think all that much has been changed in the book, but I think there's at least half of it is missing.
Yeah.
So, and also in there, it does say things like we're saying right now. It's just that the idea of it, the person standing in front of somebody else, telling them how it is, and the people not being involved, they're just receiving, and they're being told to follow rules that some of them may not feel right. I know when it's funny, I was talking about this yesterday. I was 12 and I was visiting cousins, and I had this experience where we went to a church and the preacher was yelling. So he was up there yelling and talking about, how negative everyone was, basically like sinning and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, that's not real. And I said it out loud to my cousin. I said, that's a lie. That's not how it works. And then that cousin was not allowed to come and see me and visit me. So it's really been used to divide,
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, why should that problem you questioning? If that's one thing that's so interesting. I had a very similar experience growing up. I went to a church, and instead of them shouting, it was almost like I felt like I would been put to sleep. The energy was so flat for me. It didn't feel like, it felt very cold and very like just so flat, and I just didn't feel. And I went to multiple different churches because quite a lot of my family are religious, and so I did experience different experiences in church, and I never once went in there and felt, yes, I'm home. Yes, this feels so right to me. This feels a connection. Whereas the second I found spirituality and learned all the, I was like, yep, this is where I'm at. This is my home. And that's the feeling you need to look. If you do find that elsewhere, that's absolutely fine. But that's what I know, and all I can speak of is my inner confirmation and what I experienced. And like you say, I'm someone that questions constantly. On my school reports as a child, they say, oh, very, very well behaved, great in knowledge and stuff, but she asked too many questions. And I remember looking at that later on as an adult thinking, why is that a problem? Why is that something that is a negative thing?
They don't know the answer.
I know, right? But I just thought, how can someone meant to be in education like have an issue with, but it's because when you question the narrative, whether that be, it threatens people's whole sense of that's their life, that's what they've built their life around, whether it is religion or even just things like you said, certain parts of knowledge. It's like people don't like things. Yeah, they don't like it. So I think this is what I've learned recently, is I've got to stop being necessarily so afraid of offending, and as long as I'm being respectful and not like emotionally connected in a way that's like coming across as overwhelming or overbearing, then it is okay to question some things and to get into certain conversations, and to also stand true into what you believe and what you know, because I do get nervous talking about these things, like I said, especially with people where there's going to be a contradicting conflict. And I think that is what they've done throughout the years. Like you say, honey, there was a higher plan in terms of, as you were saying, there's so much truth in these religions about what's going on now, about the consciousness awakening. I mean, in Jehovah's Witnesses, there is literally so much scripture about the awakening and the consciousness and the ascension, and in forms of a judgment day. But then kind of at the end there's like a side note, and it's like, well, if you're not Jehovah's Witness, you won't ascend. And it's just that's where I get stuck on that, on the humanization of these things, because obviously in my opinion that's not the case. It's for all to access that consciousness as long as we do the work within. But yeah, I think it's about now being able to stand in what we know and being able to also have these conversations so that we can show the similarities, so that we can question the differences, and so that we can question the things that maybe don't make sense, because if they don't make sense to us, then guaranteed they probably don't make sense to a lot of other people, but they're just going along with it because a lot of people that they know are, and that they've been taught to do that. So sometimes it just takes one person questioning it, like we did in 2020, to create that ricochet of effect of questioning these things that don't quite sit right with us.
Yeah. I think it's really important right now. And you can start out in certain ways when you're having a conversation with people, and you can say, oh, okay, I get that. So this is my point of view, or this is how I see it. This is how it comes from my internal workings. And that way they're not feeling like you're pressuring them. So there was a difference in how we approach people, I feel like. And
Yeah, I totally
in the
agree.
past, like with the disclosure movement, it's like, do you know about this? You have to know about this. And
Yeah.
I think changing that to, this is what I see, and this is where I agree with you, and this is where I feel like there's more room to grow, or maybe I don't agree with that part of it. And one of them would be the 144 from that religion, because they say 104, and you can correct me in the comments if you've been in that religion. But 144,000 will ascend. 144,000 is a frequency, and
Yeah.
144,000 is part of the ascension. It's not how many people will.
No, it's
So
not a literal, and that is
yeah,
so relevant that you said that, honey. When something's written down, it's like a text. How many times have we read a text message and thought, oh, that sounds arsey, or that sounds like this, and really it wasn't with any intention. It's just the way you read it, you interpreted it in that way. How
yeah,
many people will certain scriptures and books and interpret that differently? So is there a fine print like underneath to where we can ask questions? Go, okay, so we can follow this commandment, but what about in this circumstance? Well, what about in this circumstance? Like, where's the blurred lines between that? And that's the thing, like we can't have a one size fits all when it comes to an awakening, when it comes to an ascension. It's just not going to happen. That's why there is that feeling inside that like feels wrong. It feels like you're trying to put a shoe on that doesn't fit, because it's not your necessarily truth and alignment to the
yeah,
highest frequency. And that's the point. It's not a literal thing like the number. It's not a literal thing. And there's many things that have been taken as a literal thing that is more about the energetic representation, the frequency that's coming through. And I think that needs to be looked at a lot more, because like I said, we're not saying that a lot of these religions they're not wrong. They've got so much truth and so much awakening in them. That's why so many people resonate with them. But with that, then they have been, again, the interpretation of where you say this, the way you present that. I always use words like I feel, in my opinion, in my personal interpretation, because that takes away that, oh, this is a fact, this is my truth, and this is on you then, whether the people that watch it, the people that hear that, whether they want to believe that. But it is in terms of like it's the limiting that's come from that, and then people resonate with the truths within, but then it's then okay, give your power away to something external and know that you can never be as powerful or as at that level of external power, which is not necessarily true.
right,
If we're making the image of God, then we have that accessibility to that same energy, that same representational frequency. But it's just about removing the ego or the chatter or the lower frequency energy within your own self, trauma, toxification, parasites, all this different level of low frequency energy, so that you can have access to that higher frequency within yourself, which is again then connecting to God, connecting to source, whatever you want to call it. It's a frequency. It's
yeah,
not a place, it's a person, it's a level of consciousness. And that's why we can work with angels, which are on 12th density, and some fluctuate, but usually around 12th density. We can work with them, channel with them, meditate with them. Like I work with these angels all the time. And that's something that in religious beliefs we're taught that you're not capable of doing that because it is too high of a frequency, which again I don't personally believe is true, because we have access. Once you're a channeler, once you have the ability to hold space for different frequencies, then you can easily communicate with different density beings, whether that's via meditation or channeling or visual, audio, clairsentient, whatever sense you're going to use. But I definitely think it's time for us to kind of explore a little bit, question a little bit, question your own sense of narratives. And that's why I loved this conversation, because it made me expand on my own knowings and give more clarity to myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think really when you're in a conversation, ask yourself, am I looking to people from the outside of me to support my, belief system that I'm portraying? Or do I actually feel it? Did I come up with it myself? Does it resonate with me? And I think that is part of the sovereignty. And, just like you ask, is this coming from fear or love? You want to also ask, is this coming from me or from somebody that told me this and I've just taken it on, or do I really believe it? And I think that's going to be a big part of the difference in the unity piece. And another thing that's very interesting is a lot of people think we're in the end times, which we are having an ending, but we're also having a beginning.
It's great. It's the Great Awakening.
Yeah. So we're beginning something new. So the old has to go. And that's how you clean your house. You have to throw some stuff away, right? So
or even
I think, it's been turned into something fearful.
It has. And I think the reason why they've put it on as the end times, the fear base and Judgment Day and all this, is because this again might offend some people, I don't mean to, but in my opinion, the religion used it, a lot of it from the darker agendas did use it to suppress and to indoctrinate, and that's what's ending. And that's why it's perceived as the end times, because once we hit a certain frequency, the layer of control that they had over us, that will not resonate and it will not be able to catch hold, because the fear that we had that made people conform to the religions will not exist within them. So it cannot exist within their lives, which means that sense of that religion as we know it, or those religions as we know it in them ways, won't have the same power dynamics that they have now, because a lot of it's built upon fear of just in case. How many things are done on the just in case. My mum once said, because again she was brought up, she wasn't brought up Catholic, she was just baptized and believed she was a Catholic, and she said she thought when she'd seen all the funerals in her family, that's always thought she thought how that would be her funeral. And then when she connected with spirituality, she realized that that never really felt right to her. It was just something that she had seen, so that's something she thought she should do. Whereas when she had the chance to think about it, she thought, wow, I want to have a celebration of life with music and with earthly things that connect me back to the earth. And I thought, I'm so proud of you for questioning that, and questioning, like you say, is that mine, or is that something that I have just taken on from someone else's beliefs and adopted it as my own?
Yeah. And I think this is how we deprogram ourselves from things that no longer serve us, is we actually take the time to listen to our own words, the things that are coming out of our mouths, the things that we're thinking, and examine it and say, is that actually true for me?
Definitely. And always trust, like, again, when I was asked, how do I know these things and where do I get my evidence from, and where have I got the information from, and a lot of the time it has been that feeling, and I was also asked if what I was working with was, well, how do I know it's not darkness, how do I know it's not lower vibrational energy? And I said because when you work either clearing by lower vibrational energy, and you feel the presence of angels, or you feel the presence of the divine guides that you have, or your higher self, or I could literally not even fathom how many experiences I've had of such divine protection, confirmation, that you would think is completely wild. Most people living a human life, a human experience, that to me just became part of the norm to live with these beings in terms of how physically represented they were in my life. And this is when you get to that level of knowing in self. It's like, you know, I was asked the question of, but what if they're right, and what if I will be, I think the word used was like damned in purgatory. I thought, and I responded with, I know with every cell in my being that my soul is ascending and that I'm on my soul path. And there is not one thing I can be told or shown from any book or any person that could take that away from me, because I know that in my inner soul. And that's the kind of confirmation and level I feel we should be at with us beliefs and with us belief system, is something that you know in your
Yeah.
soul. Again, belief is a believe in lies, it's be lies, that's why I don't like that word. But belief system is a word kind of that we don't have an alternative from, but it is kind of questioning, like, do you really feel that? Because nothing could take that energy away from me, and no one can tell me that's false or tell me it's made up. I really couldn't care what anyone else's opinion is, because I felt it and I experienced it.
Yeah,
And that's something I think we find from a book.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to go now, but trust yourselves, people. Trust yourselves. You know the answers, and just love who you are. I feel like that's going to help everybody so much to start practicing that.
Yeah,
Thank
self-love
you
is
so much.
massive at the moment. Yeah, I'm doing sessions again on helping you get back into self, only 1 day a week. But if people do want like working on self-love, because that is a big thing right now, you know, just get in touch, and don't be afraid to just reach out, even if it's just to ask a question, because
Yeah,
it can be lonely.
and we'll put that below. Thank you, Anya. This was great. Bye, everybody.